We've had two fascinating Sundays in a row here these last 2 weeks. 2 Sundays ago, we had the image of the shepherd, Jesus saying, I am the good shepherd. Do you remember that reading? John chapter 10. And in verse 16, he just gives us a real slap, a real wake-up call, when he says, I have sheep who are not part of this fold, them too I must care. So no matter which fold you're part of, which church you're part of, always remember it's a call to humility that Jesus has sheep outside of our fold, outside of our church, and he must care for them as well. No matter what word we use for them, right? Baptist, Methodist, Episcopalian, Lutheran, Presbyterian, Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox Catholic, etc., etc., etc. Jesus has sheep of many flocks, of many folds that he tends to. Last week, he continued that message by saying, I am the vine, you are the branches. Another call to humility for churches. Why? Because historically, there are churches who believe that they are the vine, and that they need to trim off those who don't fit with their church, right? Pope Benedict XVI, in his first homily as Pope, what did he talk about? How it is that sometimes the church needs to be pruned. Yikes, as if any of us should be judging who should be pruned from the vine or not. But more gravely than that, committing the sin of thinking that we are the vine. What does Jesus say in last week's gospel? Who is the vine? Are we the vine? No. Christ is the vine. He says, I am the vine. You are the branches. Who's the vine? Christ is the vine. So if anyone's going to do any pruning, let's leave that to God. That's what that whole metaphor is about. Leaving the pruning to God. Those were the last 2 weeks. As if that were not enough, we have another reading in today's first reading. If we take the Bible seriously, we've really got to stop and think. It gives us pause. What does today's first reading tell us? Today's first reading from the Acts of the Apostles. So we know that it was written by St. Luke. The Acts of the Apostles is St. Luke, part 2. And what do we have there in the 4th line of today's first reading? Peter stands up and says, in truth, I see that God, what? Shows no partiality. Think about that for a moment. We think that our God is our God. What's happening in today's first reading? God shows no partiality. Right? We like to say, God bless America. We like to think that God's favorite country in the whole world is the United States. What is Peter saying in today's first reading? God doesn't have favorites. God doesn't show partiality. In the time of the first apostles, when this was being written, which people thought that they were the favorites? The Jews. Wait a minute. Remember back then we had 2 words. What were those 2 words? We had the Jews, those who believed that Messiah was coming. And what did we call the non-Jews? Non-Jews were called Gentiles. So this is a question for you. Which are you? Are you a Jew or are you a Gentile? You're a Gentile. Unless you're a Jew, then you're a Gentile. So those of us who are Christian or Catholic, we are Gentiles. Back at the time of the first reading, the Jews thought that they were God's special people. And so when the Spirit came down in Cornelius' house, what happened? Cornelius was a Gentile. Did the Spirit just come down upon the Jews? No, the Spirit came down upon everyone. Even the Gentiles. Even the non-Jews. This was a challenge because we thought that we were God's favorite people, and suddenly they're getting the Spirit in the same way that we got the Spirit. So today's first reading really gives us pause for reflection because Jesus tells us, St. Peter tells us, God shows no partiality. God doesn't have favorites. God doesn't judge between us, separating certain people out from other people. So who are we to be doing that? If God doesn't separate out certain people, then why should we be doing that ourselves?